Welcome to the Strategy Mob Podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's up, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Strategy Mob. So I'm just practicing that thing. I got this cool fancy mic. I just like saying it. But today I have an amazing guest. I have the one and only Mr. Jay from Wrenchway, which is awesome because we get to talk about like one of my favorite topics, which is the back of the dealership. I know I do a lot of content out there about the front of the dealership, but guys, my heart is in the back. All right, for the department that produces over 50% of the net profit, yet only gets 5% of the marketing budget. It's a place I'd love to chat about. So Jay, thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I'm excited, Jason. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. For everyone out there that don't know who you are, kind of how you got started with the business, I figured let's kick this off with a little origin story. So sure. What is the origin story that is Jay?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've spent my whole life in the service business, right? And when I say my whole life, literally my entire life. I grew up in a small independent repair shop in a small town in Wisconsin, and my dad actually still operates that shop today. And as I kind of progressed and grew up in the business, I thought I wanted to be a tech, right? And so I went to school to be a tech. Came back, worked for my dad, and was terrible at it. I was not a good technician at all. So I ended up going and taking some other roles within the service business, but I went outside of automotive. So I actually went to the diesel side for quite a while, and I learned a lot. And there's a lot of really similar things between the two industries. And so I worked for a manufacturer. I worked for a dealership. I ran the parts and service departments of a 7-location construction and ag equipment dealership. And I kind of, during this my entire life, there was always an issue finding techs. And as I started to really understand that piece for myself and how hard it was to find techs, I went out and started Find a Wrench. So I started Find a Wrench about 3.5 years ago. We grew really quick and into a team of about 30 people. And with that, we just launched a new platform called Wrenchway. So we're really excited. We've got a lot of things going on, and obviously going through a pandemic has its challenges with business. But it's been really cool to see something that we started off when I started Find a Wrench. I had no idea if anybody would actually buy it right. So when you start something and it's really, I didn't have anything to really go off of. I just knew that it was a big problem. And so I started Find a Wrench and again, we grew really quick and it's cool because it ties back to a lot of my relationships throughout the industry, right? I do deal with independents. I deal with a lot of dealership groups, some of the biggest ones out there. And both on, the funny part is the dealerships on both the automotive and the diesel side. So it's kind of tied everything together. A search for a technician is pretty similar between the two different markets, but it's been really fun to take something from really nothing and just really kind of grow it. So it's we're still learning and growing every day, but I think we got through a lot of the early road bumps of me starting off in my basement and doing everything to, try to actually having people that can do stuff and are specialized and do a good job at it. So that's kind of how I got to this podcast today, right?
That's so cool. I felt, a lot of us are just kind of fall our way into the business. So it's cool to actually hear that you grew up and it's just kind of in your blood. But it is one of those industries that once it kind of gets into your blood, it is super difficult to get it out.
You're not getting out. Yeah.
You're right. You're really not. It just is what it is. Right. So, I mean, look, Jay, you've had tons of experience, in fixed ops and, look, you're in the U.S. I'm in Canada. There's just so much going on right now. As far as this pandemic, I feel like right now we're still dealing with kind of the social elements of it, and I know especially in the back of the dealership where there's a lot of touch points. You know, at the front of the dealership, we may only deal with a few hundred people a month, where the back of the dealership could deal with sometimes thousands of vehicles and those touch points. And I know from a process perspective, we've had to change so much. I mean, hell, I've even pivoted my business now where we own a chemical company, and we sell sanitization solutions, to service departments, because, well, that's the need, right? And
Yes.
actually, that's a good starting point. I'd like to get your thought on this, because I was overly worried about this. The second I heard dealerships saying that they were going to start sanitizing cars, I mean, my family comes from the hospitality industry, so it's like sanitizing in the hospitality industry is not a good idea. It's a legal requirement. Like,
Right.
there are serious fines, and it can just destroy your business and your reputation if you don't do some of these things. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on, how do you see dealerships handling this sanitizing the vehicle? What are you seeing out there right now?
They definitely took it up a notch, right? It really, I think there's going to be some things that we learn coming out of this pandemic, if we ever get out of it. But I think there's things that we can apply once we're out of it, right? And I think that is a really big one, is the sanitization, if I can say that, sanitization and just overall cleanliness, right? And I think there's been a big improvement with dealerships over, maybe even the last 10 years, 15 years, in terms of how professional they're trying to bring off their service department. And I think this is a really, really another addition to that. So I do think there's some benefit. I know it's probably an absolute pain if you own a dealership or you're running a dealership to look at your supplies bill go through the roof, but it's kind of,
Jack up that environmental fee.
It's crazy. I talked to a dealership probably 3 weeks ago, and I can't remember what he was telling me they were spending per month on just that, right? On cleaning supplies, but it was insane.
It's not only just the cost, it's also just trying to also figure out what the hell it is. Like, I hate to say this, early on, I had a lot of dealerships I consult with and I'm doing training with and stuff like that, and they were showing me these POs and what they were buying. First, the type of chemical, because they didn't know. If the chemical said it killed coronavirus, they were buying it, right? and that was it. And it's like they had no idea what the hell they were getting. I mean, I have a horror story of a Porsche dealership. All right, was in the drive-through sanitizing cars. A young lot attendant, no fault of his own, was told to go grab additional, sanitized chemical. Came out, accidentally grabbed the chemical that was used for the bathroom, which has 25% bleach in it, oh, no. And went to town on this brand new 911 Targa. Oh. All right. And, by the time they had noticed, and after the service, there were these little pink whitish dots pretty much all over the Alcantara leather, destroyed the dash, and $30,000 later, boy, this dealership learned something about having to have a proper, process in place. But it's like, but that's not the first example. I'm hearing dealerships out there buying stuff. They're spending ridiculous amounts of money. There were a lot of companies out there that took advantage of the lack of dealership knowledge and education as far as what chemicals actually are. And, I saw some dealerships that were paying 12, 13, 14, 15, up to 20 some odd dollars a liter for this stuff. I mean, that's cutting into your serious, and that's going to cut into your margins, super fast. So I feel like it's a whole new realm that dealerships have to get educated on. There's products out there that have bleach in it. There's products out there that have corrosive material. So they have a type of acetone to it, which will kill it. But guess what else it'll do? And then there's products that kind of fall in that chlorine, line, which actually does make sense because it's not corrosive, it's not acidic. But anyways, I can go on this forever, but I'll stop.
Well, that 911 story makes me want to cry. Like, right? That's a nice car. That's a really, really nice car.
But it's how do we figure out? How do we get the cost involved? How do we actually train on this whole new process? It's important to not just the customer, it's also important to the techs.
Yes.
Like, similar to kind of frontline, I don't want to but it is. I mean, they're dealing with so many people's cars on such a regular basis. I mean, it is super important as a dealership that we know that we're protecting them and we have a process in place. It's not like the restaurant industry where there are laws and legislation of how we do it. Like dealerships are having to figure out this crap on their own. And it just worries me a lot. And it goes down to even like, dealerships right now are looking to bring in new technicians, new staff. And guess what? A lot of these new techs and new staff are asking about. What's your process?
Yeah.
Have you had talked to any dealerships recently about identifying and developing out their sanitized process? Just out of curiosity.
I have not heard one dealership say that.
That scares me.
I agree. I don't know how, and I think it maybe goes back to a technician in general, right? And maybe the perception that, hey, they're not going to care about this. They get oil on their hands every day, that like it. And there is still some of that old school mentality in the back end of a shop, but there's also starting to become a new mentality coming in too, as you get this younger workforce in that does care about that more. And I think not. So this is kind of an interesting thing, because I think it brings up a broader topic in that and I'm guilty of this, right? Is putting all technicians in the same bucket. Like
right?
Like we are the worst as far as an industry at saying, oh, a technician thinks this. I'm like, have you ever talked to it? Like multiple technicians? They're not all like robots. They're not all exactly the same. Like they have different personalities and they have different strengths and
there's 3 different generations right now working in the back. And
boomers,
I don't think we're not having those conversations either, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
No, you're spot on, Jason. And that's where, if you think about how different those generations are, and I was actually at a conference last year where they talked about that, and they said this isn't a new thing, right? They actually had a cover of like Time magazine from like the 60s, but they kept the headline, but they didn't actually show the rest of the cover. And it talked about how they thought that this next generation was lazy and was, like didn't listen and all this stuff. And everybody's thinking they're talking like baby boomers talking about millennials, but it was actually whatever generation that was back in the day talking about baby boomers. So it literally just translates every generation, and there's just generational gaps, and they're a real thing,
They are a real thing, and it's not only dealing with the different generations in the background, but it's also how you're attracting those different generations. Like, I mean, I know dealerships right now that look, they still want those older guys. Yeah. The kind of roughneck foreman, that's back there that, can literally put a hand on a car and go, yeah, it's a head gasket.
It's a beautiful
and then you got the younger guy that wants to bring out his tool and plug it in. And he goes, no, son, put that away. It's the head gasket. No, but there's such a broad range out there. So it's like, how do we attract? How do we bring in that new talent? I mean, look, not only do we have the complexity of multiple generations, but now we also have the complexity of this being a pandemic. And, to your point, we were mentioning this off camera, you had some dealerships that were trying to bring on as many new techs as they can in the month of July. So, I mean, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts, like, in the middle of a pandemic, how do we bring in this new blood?
So I was a little different than a lot of people as we went into the pandemic. And one of the things that I advised a lot of our clients on was I said to be aggressive. And while that sounds really, really scary, down here in the US, most dealerships, as long as they weren't huge public companies they tried to take the money, but they took the PPP money and that paid for wages. So, while it was all doom and gloom through that process, the folks that got the PPP money ended up really, really far ahead. They did really well. And there were some big companies that were letting go of lots of technicians. And granted, I don't know if they were cherry picking the technicians on who they wanted to keep and who they didn't want to, but the fact was that there was probably a month time period where we at Find a Wrench were just getting flooded with resumes, like just people applying like crazy. And maybe if they saw some uncertainty in their, if you work for a public company and you can see everything, there's probably some worry based on what they're saying, right? And as I listen to some of these, I like to listen to the earnings calls, right? And one of the things that they talk about was how technicians are so valuable, and they weren't cutting technicians for the most part, but the technicians didn't hear that the same way. So they were afraid, hearing of all of these cuts and everything like that, that, hey, maybe I'm next, and not knowing, like, hey, you're really valuable, like that you're one of the last people they're going to think about letting go of. So I was advising clients to be aggressive through that. We did have a couple of dealerships specifically that were aggressive, and they landed some great talent in that time period. Now it's kind of like the Wild West again now, right? So like trying to find a tech, we've been absolutely buried. And I think my whole kind of spiel here is that we've got to make, you're selling to these technicians, right? It's not the other way around anymore. And even in an interview, it's a lot of times they're interviewing you more than you're interviewing them, right? And so really kind of buying into that mentality and having a paradigm shift on how you approach a tech is so huge, so huge. And so I think I know that's a loaded answer to the pandemic question,
but no, you're right though. I mean, because it's even during the pandemic. All right, we have different techs coming in, different generations. All right, you can't treat them all the same. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? I mean, you can't. Someone who's green, who's coming into the space, they want to know that there's a path for them. All right. Yes. Like if they legitimately decide they want to make this a career, they want to know how they can get to that foreman level, or maybe even how they become that service manager level, or even some of them how they even become the dealer principal. But
and I think you're going to get more of that though, right?
You are. That's
in the past it was traditionally sales, right? And so as that service part of the business becomes so much more important and absorption becomes so important, that when you have somebody that knows fixed ops, does sales become more commoditized, and that fixed ops side become really, really, really important. And you led the show off by talking about that, right? And bringing 50% of the profit in, like it's such a big deal, and it's something we undersell, as an industry, and it's probably just because it's not as sexy as sales, right?
No, for sure. Hey, look, I'll tell you right now, some of the best salespeople I ever had started as techs.
Yes.
It just wasn't necessarily their grind. Or even some of the older guys I had, who I actually migrated them out of being the foreman and into a sales role. They shined, they
Yes.
just didn't feel like they wanted to turn wrenches anymore. It was just getting a little too hard for them and on their bodies and stuff. So it's just like, I think that's what it is. I think any new person coming into it, regardless of the generation that they're in, all right, they want to know that if I'm going to be coming to work for your dealership, like, is there paths? Is there opportunities? If I come in and I decide that maybe this isn't what I want to do and I want to work the counter, can I work the counter? If is there an opportunity that I get into this, and it's like I only spend so many years doing this, and because of physical reasons or whatever other reasons I decided I don't want this, can I go try sales? It's like, I think what it is just, it's no different than what the customer wants to know from a dealership is how flexible you are. Yeah. All right. I think any new technician that's coming in wants to know how flexible the dealership is. And to your point, you mentioned a little bit earlier, Jay, and I kind of want to talk a little bit, because I want to go back to that point, is you talked a little bit about, like, during the pandemic, there were some people that really continued to engage and the ones that didn't. All right. And what we're seeing right now, Jay, is we're seeing the cream rise to the top. We're seeing who the real leaders are. All right. And, I'm telling you right now, I mean, I don't know about you. I'm curious if you saw the same thing. Like, I had some dealerships that we work with that were amazing, and their communication, I see the key was communication. During this whole thing, they maintained their communication with their staff, their customers. It was amazing. And then I saw some dealerships, man, that stuck their heads in the fucking sand, stuck their fingers in their ears, and was like, la, 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 until this whole thing blows over. And, they're the ones I think are suffering right now. Did you see that same thing?
Absolutely. Like 100%. I think it, and I don't know if it was so much that they were, it's similar to 2008, right? Like when shit started to hit the fan, it was like, oh no, like what do we do? And it, I think people get paralyzed by fear, and fear of not knowing when this thing is going to end was a huge deal, and it still is, right? I think there's still a lot of worry of, when does this end? When does life ever, if it ever does get back to normal? Um, but that was such a key part, was the communication from the true leaders, and not only communication but transparency too, right? To really talk about, I saw some strong leaders that would share financials, right? And share, I think that's such a powerful thing to do, because from a text point of view, they probably don't get that all the time, or even down to like a BDC manager or something like it. There are times where people just have no idea what the health of the dealership is. So those that were communicative and transparent through the entire thing, I think they kept their people comfortable, even if they had to do a salary cut, or if they had to do any form of layoffs. The ones that were really, really strong with communication, I think they're going to build loyalty coming out of this.
I'm so with you on that. Like, I mean, really, it drives loyalty. It creates that better customer experience. Look, at the end of the day, happier employees make for happier customers. All right. So it's like, I think as an industry, we spend so much time on trying to figure out how the hell we're going to make our customers happy. And it's like, well, dude, just back the fuck up.
Yeah.
All right. Make your employees happy, and guess what they will do for you. All right, that energy, that excitement that they're there and they're at a place that they're happy and they're looking forward to come into, that it just oozes out of them and all over their customers. That was a weird analogy, but well, but it's true, right?
Yeah, and I forgot what book it is, but it talks about how customer satisfaction is never greater than employee satisfaction. And so if you think about it in those terms, if you're treating your people right, and if it's easy, I talk about it all the time on a lot of the stuff that we do, but it's easy to shove a tech in the back and not talk to them and treat them like a second class citizen. But it's those that are engaged. And I was on a fixed ops call last night where they had a former dealer principal talk, and he talked about how he would check in not only daily, but like every quarter of a day with everybody on his team. He was walking around the dealership all the time, and just to even see him out there is a huge deal. And you talk about the path to growth. One thing I want to touch on that you mentioned, or that you talked about, was when you promoted that foreman to a sales role, or you transition them over. That not only helps that person out, it helps everybody else out in the shop to say, okay, there are ways to advance, right? And even if it's staying in the shop, and there's ways to become a master level, god of everything, as compared to a salesperson, or if you want to go somewhere else in the business, we're not going to hold you back, right? Like, we're going to help you get there, and that's such an important message.
Service of the dealership really starts at the service of the dealership, right? I mean, if I could, I would make all my sales team actually spend time back there before they came up front. Smart. Because they do. They need to know what is required, what goes on behind the scenes for that to happen. They need to have that appreciation. I mean, I'll tell you, that foreman that we turned into a sales manager, I mean, when he sold cars, he sold with conviction.
Because he knew it.
Well, yeah. And it was like, I would buy a car off of him any day of the week. Because it's like, he sold it from this place where I'm like, look, that car right there, that car is going to last you for a long time. That car is going to get you what you need to do. It's going to be safe for your family. It's going to get you to work. I'm going to put myself behind it. All right. I mean, sure enough, every once in a while, I could see him in the back where I'm like, no, get back in front. I'm like, he's like, yeah, but this customer's having this problem. I can fix it like in 2 seconds. I'm like, no, stick it through the shop.
But from a customer experience standpoint, if that person that worked on your car for years is now the one selling it to you, and you feel comfortable with them and trust them, that you know what you're talking about, and it's not just trying to sell me on something I don't want. There's true value in what your knowledge is, and what you think about this car.
Oh, it was a great person to have. And I'll tell you right now, he bought every used car right too. Because he just had so much bloody experience.
Yes.
He knew how much it was going to cost to get this thing back on the road. Hey, I got an idea. I want to pass an idea by you, because I'm working on this right now with a handful of dealerships. And, you know, during this pandemic, everyone's had to figure out how to do a lot with a little, right? Yeah. Like, I think a lot of people at the dealership were wearing multiple hats, and now we're coming to get back to, you know, this place of normalcy. And I'm still a little concerned because we're only dealing with the social impacts. We haven't dealt with the economic impacts. And I remember the economic impacts of the recession and how the front of the dealership really lost, and was the back of the dealership that really kind of held or pretty much maintained the profitability of the dealership moving forward. And right now I'm working with a dealership that really had that feeling of doing a lot with a little. And they want to continue that from an operations perspective. So right now we're working on training and coaching the technicians to be the advisor.
Wow.
And I'm curious about this. Look, we're playing with it. You know, I'm not saying we're 100% right on this one, but, you know, so far what we've seen was actually seen higher hours per RO. All right. We're seeing a higher CSI than we have in the past. Maybe it's still a little early. So it could be there, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on this hybrid approach between service advisor and technician, actually bringing them into one.
I love it. I think that's a really, really smart idea. And rather than reading off a piece of paper or off a computer saying, hey, this is what the tech said is wrong with it, that they can say, hey, you know what? Your brakes are shot. This is there's no doubt about it.
Like, with conviction. I was literally just out there. All right. I'm telling you right now, the bloody thing is shot.
Yeah. But as you start to get more involved with digital inspections and that kind of thing, where you have visuals to be able to show a customer and then have the technical knowledge to be able to explain it even in a bit more detail. I think
I love the fact, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I love the fact that you brought that up, because that's actually why the dealership headed this direction. So they were doing that video presentation. So it took, I mean, this wasn't a new thing. This didn't happen overnight. Like, they had been working on their video presentations with their techs for like the last year. So before all this happened. But then, you know, we have found that the techs were getting so used to and so comfortable doing this. It's like, can we just remove that phone and just put them in front of the customer and do the exact same thing? So, sorry, continue with yours, but that's actually how it started. So I just wanted to.
I love the approach, and I love the thinking behind it, because I think there's a lot of value there. My one worry with it would be if you get a tech that doesn't necessarily like to deal with customers, right? And I'm sure you can work around that, or, you know, if that person's not necessarily comfortable, maybe you have some different setup. But I think from a technician's perspective, it might give them an opportunity to make some more money too, right? And so as you're trying to
that's what we were looking at, right?
Yeah. So if you're trying to take care of your techs and you're trying to get them more money, I absolutely love that idea. I think it's really, really smart. I'm fascinated to hear where you go with it, because I think
look, the technology in cars have changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're seeing techs don't have nearly as much grease under their fingernails and all over their, you know, their clothes. It's because the tech of everything is just so much. It's just changed.
Absolutely.
You know, so much. And, you know, to your point, it's funny because at this one dealership, and you brought that up, so it made me remember this story. We had this one guy that's exactly that. Just, yeah, you ask him a question, he's got like 2 words to answer it, and that's it, you know? And it was like, we were a little nervous about putting him in front of customers. Ironically, he's actually the one that's doing the best.
Really?
You know what it is? Is because he's a little rough around the edges, but it's also, there's he's the worst salesperson in the entire world.
There's no fluff.
There's just no, there's like, he's not going to sell you anything, right? No. Ever. Like, you just know it going into it, right? So he just kind of comes out, and it's just, I think what it is just the few words that come out of his mouth that just come out with so much conviction. He's just like, all right, I'll do it. I remember he actually got into this customer said he wasn't going to do his brakes, and I'm like, oh man, here it comes. And he's like, all right, I'm going to write on your work order, the car's not safe. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, the car's not safe. You can drive it out of here, but it's not safe.
But you're signing off on this.
So yes. I'm just going to, just, I need you to initial that right there. The guy goes, well, I mean, is it, well, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I don't think he said more than 6 words to the guy. He just wrote not safe, and he goes, I need you to sign there.
I think it's great. And you know, as you look at how these tools that we give service departments evolve too, you know, it's the more it's
The
driven.
tablets now and all that
Yeah.
information's there.
Yeah, you don't need a ton of that. And I don't know that customers really want that anyways. And I think, you know, as I've been in a lot of meetings and learning a lot about kind of how we're changing, I think it's going to change how much customers actually want to come into the dealership anyways, right? So if this allows you to take a piece out or maybe a barrier out where they can communicate directly via text or through their platform of you know, whatever it is, CDK or whatever it is, that they're able to go through and talk directly to a customer. And not only that, you stop the steps back and forth from the service department to the service desk. I mean,
Oh yeah,
like
think about how much
somebody,
time you save. Like
oh my
just like,
goodness.
I mean, 'cause, like, I mean, think about this. I mean, look, I was an advisor. You know, I mean, I would have to go in the back. I'd get 5-7 minutes from the tech, and then I had to take all those four-letter words that he was using to describe the problem with the car, and I have to translate that out to something that I could present. I
Yes.
mean, like it'd take me easily 10 minutes, easy 10 minutes for me to go talk and then come back. And then if there was some type, then I was going back and forth, back. I'm like, this seems stupid. It
Yeah.
just seems like a bad idea. I mean, look, we're giving all these techs great uniforms. Let's get them out there and show off
Right.
how awesome these uniforms are. You know, get them talking in front of people. I don't know. I think a lot of people might be listening to this and go, "You're freaking crazy, Jay."
No, you know what though? I think that's what it's going to take as we kind of try to evolve from this, right? And business is changing. It's not going to stay the same as what it always was. And that's where I think there's some cool opportunity. The one question, so I've got another question for you on that regard. Like in the tech acting is kind of that service advisor, their own service advisor. How do you get around write ups, right? And having clean work orders and clean spelling. Is it more menu selling type stuff where you're clicking a
100% is
box?
menu selling. So the dealership that we're working with, their OEM already mandated this tablet style format.
Okay.
So it was, you know, the service advisors were already going to have to use kind of a tap, 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 tap kind of a process. So it wasn't a whole hell of a lot
Right.
to just kind of take it to that next step. You know, because that tablet port also does kind of remove notes a little bit. I'll tell you this though. Here's one thing we thought was we actually noticed this just recently, this last week when we were sitting down going to a consultation, is the tech notes have gotten a lot better.
Oh, for sure.
Because you know what it is because when that customer comes back, they want those notes now. So you're not getting these half-assed tech notes where it's like
Yeah.
just bullshit notes. Like they're actually taking time to put the notes in because their pay structure is based on the work that the customer does now. All right. So now when the customer comes back, they want those notes. So
That's good.
It was an interesting
That's good.
byproduct. It was an interesting byproduct.
Who takes the first call from the customer?
So it's a BDC.
It is.
So the
Oh.
BDC is taking the first call, all right, and the BDC, there's a representative downstairs now that's also checking them in, and then the tech comes out, introduces him or herself, takes the keys and says, "I'm gonna go work on your car right now. I'll be back in a little bit to tell you what's up."
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's
Right?
a cool approach. That's a really cool approach. I commend you guys for just kind of, it's so cliche to say thinking outside the box, but that's truly that's different.
Well, I think that's what we're going to have to do, right, moving forward. I know during the recession, and I'm curious if you had the same. Sales lost a lot, man. I had to rely so much on the back of my dealership to bring in the profitability that just kept everyone employed. Like, I feel like right now, and I'm not trying to be a doomsday person or any of that crap out there, but if you're out there watching and listening to this right now, you just come off yourself an amazing June and July. You know, understand that is pent-up demand that you're dealing with right now. It is, we're only dealing with the social elements of this pandemic. We have yet to deal with the economics of it. You know, when all these government credits end, was it here December or something? I don't know. Well, they may renew it again, but who knows, right? You know, like that's when we're really going to start feeling the pressure. People are going to start losing their jobs quickly, you know, and, you know, that service department, I know during the recession, kept us in the black in most cases. Like, get prepared. You know, don't get reactive. Be prepared. You know, bring on those people, but have a plan. you know, that's the other thing I've also kind of find. I thought from, and I'm going to ask you because you're the hiring expert on this, is that I always feel like from a technician perspective, we're always looking to hire like the superstar. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, well, how many?
Tomorrow.
What was your hours per RO? And what was your labor effectiveness? And what was, you know what I mean? It's like we're just like, we're always like, oh yeah. I feel like right now though, like we got to start hiring for the team.
Yes.
And so, and I think you're probably in line with this as well. So how do we do that? How do we hire for the team versus hiring for that superstar type mentality?
So you've got to do it proactively, right? That's the biggest mistake I see dealerships make, is that they only hire when they absolutely need somebody. And it's such a mistake, because what happens is then they take that, you know, that anybody that can breathe, right? So they get to the, and it's not a fit from a skill level. It's not a fit from an attitude level, but it helps them get, you know, some inspections out there, you know, it helps them do something, right? And it helps them get a customer off their back. So they hire somebody. And rather than actually having a plan, and I preach this all the time, like just have a plan of some type. How are you always going to be recruiting? And I think we've, you know, even from the manufacturer's level, it's gotten kind of worn out a little bit of the always be recruiting. You know, you hear it over and over and over again, but it's really, really important. And from my experience, it's very rare that a dealership doesn't need a tech, right? Like it seems like they always need techs. Yet they'll get complacent and get, you know, if customer work slows up a little bit, then they're like, okay, we're kind of comfortable right now. We don't, and then boom, something happens. And a lot of times it's cyclical stuff that like it happens every year. You get busy at this month every year and it doesn't stop. So rather than, you know, they'll get slow and just kind of sit on their heels. Whereas if you can use that time to get really aggressive, going out and trying to find somebody. The pandemic was kind of an extreme example of that, but there's always a lull in somebody's business over the course of a year. And that's when you get comfortable and a little bit fat and happy of like, yeah, we're taking care of customers. And then when that next boom happens, you're not ready for it. And customers are screaming and or they're going somewhere else and they're not even talking to you. It's such a big deal that, and I notice this with companies that have full out HR departments, right? Like that have full blown recruiters. Like they get happy because the service manager is not yelling at them anymore. And so they take their foot off the gas a little bit. Whereas if they took a different approach and were really looking all the time and keeping postings out there and keeping, you know, just really engaged. And I always use kind of an old term, but to build your Rolodex of people and really court them, right? Because if they're a good tech, they've got a plethora of options. Like if they need a job, they can go about anywhere and get a job, right? So it's really that paradigm shift of changing the mentality of dealerships to think, you know what, it's not as easy to hire these guys as it always was. We need to do something a little bit differently here. And we train our clients with that constantly. And it's still a battle, right? We're still struggling with that. And them understanding that, you know, putting an ad in the paper and getting, 5 techs to apply to it this week isn't going to happen anymore. There's not enough supply to fill the demand. And when we start to really, really understand that, I think we change a little bit.
Well, I think the other thing we got to also understand is that we have to develop these techs.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, my door rate was abnormally high for my area, okay? But over half of my technicians were masters. That's weird. You know, most dealerships my size probably had 1, maybe 2. I had over half of my team, all right, were master techs. And, you know, I did that completely on purpose. You know, I didn't want, you know, to have this kind of middle or this high, middle, and low level kind of techs. Like I wanted techs that came in when during the interview they said they want to be a master tech. Like good, I got 6 of them back there that want to teach you to be one. You know, and I find like that there's a disconnect there. It's like I feel dealerships. I'm always kind of bitching and moaning and complaining. There's no techs. There's no techs. What the hell are you doing to develop out that next tech? You know, it's like, you know, like I mean, I knew that, you know, my group, they were going to buy another dealership. This is just going to happen, right?
Right.
So like, I'm like, cool. I will constantly be developing techs. So when we go buy that next dealership, boom, sticking them another one over there. All right. You're looking at buying another one. Cool. I got 3 guys ready to go. Insert. And it's just like, it was that mentality. I mean, even when I had my own dealership, it was like, man, I got a lot of master techs. Maybe I should go buy another dealership. And sure enough, we did.
Smart.
We went and bought a second location, and it was because it was a plug and play. Literally 1 week, I had everything up there running. Awesome. And it was like boom, just kind of rinse and repeat. But I want to get your thoughts on developing, because you can hear in my tone, I get super frustrated. 4-letter words start coming out and stuff like that, because I'm just like, stop bitching and moaning, do something about it.
Do something about it.
What are your thoughts on developing out technicians?
So I don't know, and I'll mention him by name just because I know he won't care. But do you know Ed Roberts down at Bozard Ford in St. Augustine, Florida?
Yeah. I follow some of his stuff. Yeah. So
Ed is probably the master at this. He is unbelievably good. And granted, they're a big Ford dealership, so they've got a lot of capacity to be able to do this. But they really kind of came up with a really true training program where you bring somebody that's more of that C-level lube tech type technician and really try to grow them up through the ranks. And they do it by basically they've got a 6-bay part of their shop, right? So it's actually I believe it's not even connected to the shop. It's kind of a separate piece or a second set of bays. And what he does is he puts every single new tech in there. And what they do is they have a former tech of theirs that was a master level tech who sits in there with a group of like 6 of them, 6 techs. And his job is literally to teach them. So even after they get out of tech school or whatever it is, that
is so cool.
Yeah. So they're learning how to diagnose, they're learning how to do everything. And while they're doing that, they've got a mentor that's like literally right there. And it's not just some made up mentor program. Like it's truly, they've got somebody there. And then when they're ready, it takes them, I think, about 9 months. They're able to turn them into the normal shop. But it solves quality control. It solves some of the initial issues that you have with a new tech. And I've been in those shoes of a new tech. It's not an overly welcoming place to come a lot of times. And so when you get in there and you've got somebody that truly cares about raising them up through the ranks, that's such a big deal. And Ed does it better than anybody else that I've ever seen. I mean, he knocks it out of the park. They're very intentional about it, and they're still able to turn time with them, right? Like they're still able to sell hours because they're confident they've got somebody to look over it. And so that's a really good thing. The other piece that I always look at is the relationship with the local schools. And I know this is kind of cliche to say as well, but you just go talk to the tech school in your area, go talk to the high school in your area, and just see what they need, see what, kind of show them how cool some of this technology is. It's not the same business that we were in 20 years ago. This is a really, really different and evolving business. So to get in there, and the one thing I say in a lot of our stuff, we're going to do a virtual conference for Wrenchway in the fall, and we're going to have a tech school panel on there where they're going to talk about what industry can do to better support the schools. I often equate it to the salesman service manager relationship in a dealership, where a service manager sitting back in his office, and here comes old Tom, the salesman. And the first thing that goes into a service manager's head is like, oh, what's he want now? Like, it's not ever like he's coming back to wish me that I'm a good day and just check on me. They're like, he's asking for something. And it's the same thing with tech schools. When a dealership approaches, like, oh, great, what do you need now? I see they're calling me, and like, where have you been at when we were trying to get students in the seats? So to take a more proactive role with schools, I think is another really, really important piece.
I agree with you. I think a good, solid partnership truly does help. I've consulted. I've spoken to a lot of the tech schools before. I've especially ones that are just going through it. I'm like, look, this is what you should do during the interview process. I mean, I've helped, and the fun thing is it's helped me, but I feel like though, when you think of creating a partnership, it is a partnership, which means you need to give as much as you get. So don't go into it just expecting you're going to get something out of them without giving something. You got to go in right out of the gate, prepared to give without expectations. All right, develop out that relationship, and then it will pay for itself full on. But I think that's kind of like, I mean, I know we're getting kind of towards the tail end of our podcast today, but I mean, that's kind of the gist of the conversation we're talking about. Like, we got to start thinking outside the box. We need to get ourselves prepared. I mean, I remember when I launched my 4 days on, 3 days off schedule. Boy, I was like, I mean, I had other dealerships call me. They were pissed.
Yeah.
They're like, do you know what my techs right now are talking about? Like, how dare you? How dare you give your techs 3 days off every single week? What the hell are you doing over there? Like,
you're on the other side smiling.
Oh, I was laughing my ass off. I'm like, I got them on speaker. I'm like, guys, come listen. This is funny. Come listen. And it's just, but no, it is like we have to start thinking outside the box. We want to drive new talent. We got to start thinking about that. I mean, if it's making that partnership, creating that partnership, it's creating that development program. I love what Ed does. We got to get Ed on a podcast.
Yes, you do.
He's great. Blast to
He's great.
If it's going, really outside of the box and going to an advisor tech type role, or, even if it is just something as simple as just creating a schedule that is more family friendly.
Yes.
All right. And giving them a 4 day on, 3 day off approach, especially right now. It's these little things that I think will make big difference.
Huge.
But at the end of the day, it's all about, thinking outside the box and creating employee happiness, because that generates that customer happiness is what we're looking for. Hey, Jay, thanks so much for taking the time to jam with me today. This has been a lot of fun. But before I let you go, though, I get to ask one last question of you, which is my favorite question of the day. All right. I want to know, Jay, what is pissing you off?
This is a extremely loaded question. Coronavirus mostly, but I think in general, in some forms, the lack of progress that we're seeing in the industry, right? And from the standpoint of some of the stuff that you just talked about, where we need to think of ways to make a technician's day-to-day life better, right? Because we don't only have a problem with the pipeline of techs coming in, we've got a huge problem with techs leaving the industry altogether. And so that doesn't help anybody, right? That doesn't help. That's going to cause more of you stealing from a neighboring dealership to fulfill your obligations at your own shop. And you're already seeing that a lot more. So figuring out ways to make life easier on techs in general, their day-to-day life, really that respect level. These are some pretty talented people. So trying to make sure that we're taking care of our own, I think is my big one.
I'm with you on that. I find, I hate to say it, but there's some dealerships out there that don't treat techs like they're actual people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I know that sounds bad, but it's kind of true. It's just kind of like, well, they're just in the back, but
we'll get another one.
We'll get another one. There'll be another one out there, but it's just really not the case. I think what it is just, it's developing people, making connections, being a human, right? And I think for dealerships out there right now, if you're looking for a new, fresh strategy, find unique ways to kind of pull back that veil, that exists between, the front and the back of the dealership, and big things will change. Hey, Jay, for everyone out there listening, watching right now, would love to connect with you and kind of follow along with what your company does and your journey. What is the best way to do so?
Yeah, you can look me up on LinkedIn and find me at my Jay Goninen. My last name's really hard to say, so I don't. So I'm sure they'll be able to see it on the show notes. Yeah. Don't worry. Trying to order pizza is a problem with my last name, but you can go there. Obviously, with Wrenchway and Find a Wrench, they're kind of two separate entities that we're running as one company. But there's you can find us there. You can email me at jay@findawrench.com, jay@findawrench.com. And I'm happy to talk. I'm a pretty open book, so I just love talking shop whenever I can. So whenever anybody wants to reach out, I'm all ears.
That's awesome. Hey, Jay, thanks for taking the time to jam with me today. This has been a blast. You have yourself an amazing day.
You too. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy Mob podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to sign up to be a mobster at strategymob.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Happy podcasting.